Thank you for coming to the talk, and thank you for staying until the end of the conference. A great conference, by the way. I want to do a quick presentation before I start speaking. My name is Facundo Giuliani. As Sara said, I live in Buenos Aires, Argentina. I came directly from Argentina to Athens, a great city. I really like the city, by the way. I work as a developer relations engineer at Storyblok. We will talk about Storyblok in a little bit. I'm also one of the organizers of React Buenos Aires, the biggest React community in Argentina. We organize a monthly meetup in the city, so if you are there, please let me know so we can invite you to... Actually, Aris went to the last meetup that we organized for React Buenos Aires. Look at that. And I'm one of the organizers of NodeConf Argentina, a conference that we are trying to bring back to life after the pandemic. As I said, I come from Buenos Aires, a beautiful city. By the way, I invite all of you to join me and to visit it. In Buenos Aires, I support a football team called Boca Juniors. From my point of view, the biggest team. Oh, wow. Okay, sorry. Well, actually, it's related to the next slides that I was planning to present, because I go to the stadium every match, and we do this kind of welcome to the team. This is like a regular Sunday on the stadium, right? But I know that there was a day when Boca Juniors came to Greece to play against a team called Aris, if I'm not wrong, right? And the team got this welcome, so it's like, wow. You know, I mean, I see Buenos Aires every Sunday, I see Greece, the team coming with all this welcoming, so I know that I'm not a football player or anything, but I thought that I was going to jump on the stage and, you know, receive all that welcoming, which was really great. But I want to ask you if we can do a big round of applause for all the organizers that are making this conference possible. So thank you. But I came here today to speak about full stack composable architecture, like a term that sounds like, oh, wow. But basically, it's an idea that I try to express related to a couple of concepts. First of all, the composable architecture or composability, which is basically the idea of building a whole system or a project based on small parts or components that you can combine them to conform something bigger. I mean, a big idea or a big program, let's say. Basically, like having Lego blocks that, I mean, if you take them separately, probably you can do a lot. But if you start like joining them, you can conform something bigger. And that's basically the idea, having components or different blocks or parts that you can combine between them. And each one of these modular components, let's say, will be responsible of doing a certain particular task or a certain particular process that will help to the main project that we are trying to create. These components can be microservices or headless applications in a way of having an application that doesn't have a particular presentation layer, so you can set the presentation that you prefer. Package business capabilities, which are basically small units that are in charge of one particular workflow of a whole system. But basically, the idea is to have all these different components connected by themselves using different APIs that are used to share data. I mean, they can exchange data between them. And we use this approach, or we try to follow this approach, because the idea is that we can reuse these different components on different parts of our global system, let's say. And the idea, we do that not only to reuse the same blocks or the same components in different parts of our process, we can reuse also these components on other systems or other projects. And it's also easier to scale, because if we are isolating these different components and functions, we can also make them responsible of a particular task, that we can be sure that a certain component of my architecture will be in charge of a particular task, let's say. It's also easier to maintain because in the case that something is not working, we can quickly isolate the issue or trying to see what's the cause of the issue, because we can go directly to the particular component of the architecture that is in charge of that workflow or that task. And finally, another advantage is that we have independence from the vendors, meaning that we can get these different components that are doing a certain task, but I can replace those components with a different one from a different vendor that probably is doing the same task, probably in a little different way, but we can be sure that the task is being executed. An example of a composable architecture is the Mac architecture or paradigm, let's say. I don't know what's the name, but Mac is coming from microservices, API first, cloud native, and headless, which is a group or a paradigm, let's say, where you try to build a project using, well, the things that I just mentioned, but the idea is that you can use headless products like content management system, e-commerce platforms, or you can use, for instance, API first services for the security, as we saw in previous talks during the conference. The idea is that you can combine all these different parts to make the work easier for your developers and easier to maintain the systems that you are creating and the projects. And that will be an example of a composable architecture, let's say. Going a little bit deeper, we find the same concept in a framework like React. React uses composability to create a user interface, because in React, in a framework like React, we are creating reusable components for the different parts of the user interface of our application. So if you start to see this, I mean, we are translating the whole concept of composability to the front end of our application, or the front end layer of our application. We can define a design system, we can define a component library, as Maya mentioned in her talk before, but the idea is that we can reuse this same idea or concept for something more, focused, like the front end of our application, and create reusable components that we are using in different parts of our front end. The title of the talk was something like Full Stack Composable Architecture, and I wanted to introduce the full stack concept because I saw that lately we are trying to, we developers or the industry is trying to introduce this concept in the whole environment of an application. Not only in the components that we use in the front end of our application with frameworks like React or Vue, but also in the back end of our application using different concepts depending on the framework that we are using for our project. One example that I'm seeing is that Next.js, which is a React-based framework, they are kind of setting as a default approach the usage of React server components, which is basically using the same React components that we were using on our applications, but on the server side, like analyzing what's the possibility of rendering the HTML markup that represents our React components on the server side. Why? Well, probably there are different theories. If you've been developing for many years as me, you will probably see that all the things are like a cycle. There used to be a time where all the things were rendered on the server with older programming languages or other approaches that were used like 10 years ago, for instance. And I see that everything coming back, like all the fashions that are coming back again. But the truth is that the web servers nowadays are way more powerful than they used to be a couple of years ago. And now with concepts that are introduced on the web servers and web architectures like CDNs or edge computing or edge servers, we can have the processing force of a web server closer to the users, so we can get the advantage of that. And instead of getting the client or the device that is visiting our website rendering the content that we want to show to the people, we can use the edge servers, let's say, of our network to render that content and deliver the HTML already generated. Which is, in certain cases, it's more performant and faster for the user that is visiting our website. So these same components that we were using on the client side of our application, we can use them or render them on the server side, let's say. Another framework that is introducing something similar is Remix. Remix is also a React-based framework. But with Remix, we can do something like a full-stack component, let's say, or that's the term that Ken Sidotz used to describe that idea or approach, let's say, using the features that are provided by Remix. Because with a framework like Remix, we can create, probably it's a small font, but what we can define is at a component level, the backend logic that we are going to run for that particular component, and then all the logic that we are going to use to render the user interface for that component. So if you see on the screen, we can include on our route, let's say, or the file that is going to manage the content and the logic related to the component, we can set a loader function and an action functions that are going to be the functions that are going to load all the information or data that is related to that particular component. So instead of fetching the data from the client, we are doing that directly on the server with the loader function, as you can see. And then we have an action function that is going to be executed on the server too, where we can, for instance, create a project in this page that is going to be a list of projects. If you see on the right-hand side, we have the function that is going to actually render the HTML content that we are going to show on the page. But we have the server logic and the client logic, everything all together in the same file, and that's why the concept of full stack component. We are managing the component of, the server and the client side of the component of our project. Finally, I wanted to introduce Storyblock. Storyblock is a headless content management system that you can use to create and manage the content for your projects. But one cool thing that Storyblock has, besides the whole integration with this composability or the composable architecture, because as Storyblock is headless, that means that it offers different APIs that we can use to consume the content and create content that we are going to use on our project. And using those APIs, we can use that content and manage that content from different presentation layers, like a website or a mobile application, desktop application, or even a project that was created on another platform. We have that flexibility, and we can connect that modular component to other components of our project. But besides that, we are using the composability approach here. We also use it at the moment of representing the user interface of our content or our website, because Storyblock manage the content with a component approach. We can create reusable components on the content side, something like the header, the hero, the footer, or a call to action. And we can link the content that we are going to use for those types of blocks or components with the visual representation of those components, which, for instance, in a React project will be the React components. So we can link the React components that we are creating on the front end with the content that we are going to manage and use for those components in the content management system. All of that bringing an easy user interface for the people that is going to create the content that we are going to display on our projects. Storyblock also provides a React SDK to make the work easy and to make it in a generic way, the way of rendering the components that we are creating on the content management system and the React components that we are linking to them. We have also other SDKs for other frameworks in the case that you want to use a different technology. I wanted to present a quick demo to you. Let me see if I have 2 minutes. I promise that it is going to be fast. But I created this website using Remix and using Storyblock. Basically, it's a website where you can see we have different blogs or different parts of our page. We have a home page. We have a sportswear catalog that I can see all the different products that are being sold on the website. And if I go to the home again, well, I created this personalization logic that is showing a banner based on the interest of the person that is visiting the website. If I go to Storyblock, you can see that we have a visual editor that you can use to see how the content is going to look like. But besides this visual editor, we can see on the right-hand side the different components that I have inside my page. So inside my page, I have a rich text block or component, and then I have a personalized content component with different content variants, and each one of these variants has a call to action inside of it. These call to actions have different fields of different types, like the headline or the text fields, which are text, but also I can have an image or a link to another page, and etc. And then, well, I mean, here on the left-hand side, I can see the visual representation of that page or those components that I created. And if I go to the code of my application, I think it's pretty small, so I will maximize a little bit. What I wanted to show, I don't want to go super deep into this, but this is the logic that I created in my Remix application to render the content that is coming from Storyblok or that is being created by the users in Storyblok. You can see here that I have, again, the loader function that I created to call the Storyblok API and bring all the information related to that page from Storyblok, and all this information that is coming in a way of a JSON object, I'm using it to render all the components of my page. I have a Storyblok component, which is a React component that will render all the components from my page. Here we have, you can see the same components that are defined on Storyblok. I have the personalized content or the call to action. And again, as I mentioned before, I can create React components that are the visual representation of the components that I created inside Storyblok and that I'm providing to the content editors and the people that is going to create the content to structure the content of the pages that we are going to manage and that we want to create. So that was a quick idea of showing how we can implement this composability concept in the whole architecture of our projects. I hope you learned something new. If you want to talk a little bit more about Remix, Next.js, or Storyblok, you can come to me and we can discuss about that. Thank you very much. Evharisto, if it's okay. Thank you.